Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
This time, we're going to be looking at, well, it's a pretty unique way to think about history.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, someone's been exploring this idea of history as like a system, almost like it's got its own DNA, you know? And we've got all sorts of stuff to work with here, notes, research, even little bits that feel like they're from fictional worlds.
Interesting.
It's all pointing to this idea, so let's figure out what this Historiomics thing is all about.
I'm intrigued.
Me too. So, to start, they're calling this system a historiome.
A historium.
Yeah, basically it maps out all the forces that shape a population's history.
So kind of like if you think about the human genome,
Oh, yeah. Right.
but instead of genes, you've got cultural trends and political shifts, even stuff like environmental factors.
Oh, okay. So it's not just like a timeline of dates and battles.
No.
It's more like a bigger picture.
A much bigger picture. And they even try to visualize these historiums.
Really? How?
Well, imagine looking through like a circular window, and it's made up of all these tiny little pixels, each one representing an event or a key figure.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, the sources use all these vivid metaphors to try to make this big idea easier to understand.
I like that. So we're zooming out to see history as this dynamic thing.
That's the idea.
But then things get a little weird.
How so?
Well, these historiomes, apparently they can get sick.
Sick.
Yeah, they could call these historical illnesses historiopathies.
Historiopathies.
Yeah.
Okay.
So imagine, like, a society goes through something really traumatic,
Okay.
like a really bad war or something.
I'm following.
And this, according to the sources, this could lead to a kind of historical tumor.
A tumor in their historium.
Yeah, it's like a blockage.
Wow.
They even have a name for it, a historiotome.
A historiotome. That's a pretty intense analogy.
It is, right? So the society, instead of processing this trauma, they get stuck.
Because of this blockage.
Exactly. They might focus on certain narratives or ignore things that make them uncomfortable, or even, like, repeat the same mistakes over and over.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? It makes you think about how those past events can still be shaping societies today.
Yeah, in ways that might not be so healthy.
Right.
It makes me think about what's happening in the world right now,
Yeah.
you know? Like, how much of it is being influenced by history that we haven't really examined?
That's a great point.
But then doesn't that mean all historical narratives are kind of like sick to some degree?
Yeah.
Isn't that a little bit pessimistic?
I see your concern, but I don't think it's about labeling all history as inherently flawed.
Okay.
It's more about recognizing that history is always being interpreted, and those interpretations can have real consequences.
Both good and bad, you mean?
Exactly.
Okay, that makes more sense.
So it's less about saying history is sick and more about being aware of these potential illnesses and finding ways to address them.
To, like, treat them.
In a way, yes. And that's where things get really interesting. The person behind all these ideas, they're not just a theorist.
They're not.
Nope, they're an artist.
Oh, wow.
They call their work database arts.
Database arts. That sounds pretty technical. How does that even relate to history?
Well, they use databases and algorithms to
Okay.
create art that explores complex systems. And in this case, they're using these tools to try to visualize and understand historiums.
That's fascinating.
It is, and they have this one concept that I find really intriguing. It's called the anti-historium.
The anti-historium. What's that? Is it like anti-history?
No, it's more subtle than that.
Okay.
Think of it as all this stuff that's not explicitly part of a historical narrative.
Like what?
Like the silences, the things that get left out, the perspectives that are ignored or pushed aside.
So it's kind of like, it's like the negative space around a photograph.
Yes,
You know, it's not part of the image itself, but it shapes how you see it.
that's a perfect analogy. And by looking at this negative space in history, we might be able to understand the forces that have shaped our world even better.
Okay, so we're not just looking at a timeline of events.
No.
We're looking at a system,
With its own logic
its own potential illnesses.
and its hidden depths.
This is blowing my mind a little bit.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But okay, so where do we go from here?
Well, there's a really important text that we need to look at.
Okay.
It's called A New Organon, The Logic of Habitants.
The logic of habitants. That sounds pretty intense.
It is, but it's essential to understanding this whole framework.
So break it down for me. What's habitants?
Essentially, it's about how humans shape their environments and are shaped by them in return.
Okay, so it's not just about where we live, but how we live there.
Exactly.
Like how our actions and choices affect the world around us, and then how those changes affect us right back.
It's a constant back and forth.
A feedback loop.
Exactly. And within this framework, they introduce another really interesting concept, delocalization.
Delocalization, is that like losing your sense of place?
It's more like a shift away from fixed structures and boundaries, you know?
Okay.
Like, think about how the internet has changed how we think about place.
Oh, yeah?
We can connect with people and ideas from anywhere instantly.
It's true.
That's a form of delocalization.
It is. And it makes me wonder how this whole delocalization thing affects our understanding of history.
Right.
Does it make us more connected to the past or less so?
That's a great question. And it leads us to the idea that historical narratives themselves are becoming less fixed, more fluid. We're constantly running into new perspectives and challenging those traditional interpretations.
So history is like a conversation that's always going on.
In a way, yes.
That's really cool. But before we get too lost in all of this, let's zoom back in on the person behind these ideas for a second. They actually call themselves a failure-obsessed artist.
They do, don't they?
That's a pretty wild label. Why would anyone want to be obsessed with failure?
Well, in their case, it seems like they actually designed their first major project, this thing called the History Project. They designed it to fail.
Wait, on purpose?
It seems that way.
Why would they do that?
They saw failure as a way to understand things more deeply.
I'm not sure I follow.
By confronting the limitations of their initial methods, they were able to develop a more nuanced approach, which eventually led to the Archives Project and the whole concept of the historium.
So failure wasn't the end. It was like a stepping stone.
Exactly. And I think it speaks to a larger idea here, this willingness to challenge the way things have always been done and to keep refining our understanding.
That's pretty powerful.
It is. It's about acknowledging that we don't have all the answers and that sometimes those mistakes, they can lead to the most valuable insights.
That's a great point, and it makes me even more curious about what's coming next.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to dive into some pretty wild concepts like systemonons and noise field theory.
Now, those sound intense. Are you ready to have your mind blown wide open?
I think so. Let's do it.
All right. We're going to explore those mind-bending ideas right after this.
Okay, so systemonons and noise field theory. Where do we even start with these?
Well, systemonons are basically just systems that have a history.
Okay, so pretty much everything.
Yeah, pretty much. But the important thing is that we start thinking about systems differently, not as like static things.
So more dynamic.
Yeah, constantly evolving, changing based on what happened in the past, and interacting with their environment in ways that we can't always predict.
So like history is built into basically everything.
Exactly. And that's where this noise field theory comes in.
Okay, hit me with it.
It's the idea that we can't fully understand these super complex systems by just focusing on the obvious stuff, like the intended outcomes or simple cause and effect.
So there's got to be more to it than that.
Right. Think about listening to the radio. You tune in to hear a specific song.
The signal.
Yeah, exactly. But there's always static or interference.
The noise.
Right. And that noise affects how you experience the music, even though it's not the main point.
Okay, I get that. But what would be the noise when we're talking about history?
Oh, it could be tons of things. Individual opinions, cultural trends, even just random events that mess things up. Noise field theory basically says that this noise is always a part of anything with a history.
So to really understand history, we have to look at all of it, the noise and the signal.
That's the idea. We need to be critical and aware of all the different biases and limitations that come with any story.
It's like we're trying to tune in to a different frequency.
That's a good way to put it. And it also ties back to that idea of the anti-historium.
Ah, yeah. Acknowledging the perspectives that don't make it into the main narrative.
Right, all those silenced voices.
So history isn't just a set of facts, it's more of an ongoing discussion.
Yeah, it's always evolving. And that brings us to something we talked about earlier, historiotherapy.
Therapy for societies. I'm still wrapping my head around that one. It sounds pretty far-fetched.
Well, it is a big concept, and even in the sources, it's more of a theoretical idea, not a step-by-step plan.
So less about fixing things and more about understanding what's broken.
Right. It's about using this idea of historiomics to figure out what's wrong, what are the historiopathies that are messing things up, and then figuring out how to deal with them.
Okay, but how would that even work? Can you give me like a real-world example?
Sure. Think about a society that has a lot of conflict, maybe based on ethnicity or religion. Their history is full of it.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And maybe their historium is fixated on certain stories that just keep those divisions going.
So their shared history is actually part of the problem.
It can be, yeah. Historiotherapy might involve recognizing those harmful narratives, getting people to talk and reconcile, and trying to create a more inclusive view of the past.
So it's like rewriting the story of the society, not erasing it, but changing how it's understood.
Yeah, it's about remembering that history isn't just something that happened a long time ago, it's still shaping us today.
This is really making me think. But is there a downside? Like, who decides which history is healthy and which is sick?
That's a big question, and it's something the sources definitely talk about.
Okay, so it's not about finding one right answer. It's more about understanding how complex it all is.
Exactly, and recognizing that history has the power to hurt and to heal, and that we have to be really careful with it.
Okay, my head's spinning a little, but in a good way.
It's a lot to process.
It is, but I'm starting to see how this whole framework could be applied not just to entire societies, but to individuals too.
You're right.
We all have our own historiums, right? Our experiences, the things that make us who we are.
Absolutely. And remember how we talked about societies getting stuck in bad patterns?
Yeah.
Well, the same thing can happen to individuals. We can develop our own historiopathies, limiting beliefs, traumas, things that hold us back.
It's true. I've definitely felt stuck before, repeating the same mistakes or just not being able to shake off negative thoughts. Could those be considered personal historiopathies?
For sure. And that's what makes applying this historiomics idea to personal growth so interesting.
We could use it on ourselves.
Yeah. If we can understand our own historiomes and all that noise that might be messing with our perspective, maybe we can get unstuck.
They're like personal historiotherapy.
Right. It's about recognizing the stories we tell ourselves about our past and how those stories might be affecting us in ways that are holding us back.
That's a powerful idea. It's like we have the ability to rewrite our own stories and heal from those old wounds.
It's about realizing that we're not just products of our past, but we can shape our own futures.
This is all incredible, but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface to this whole historiomics thing.
We've covered a lot, but there's still one more key idea we need to look at. The anti-historium.
Oh yeah, the negative space of history. I'm ready to dive into that one.
Let's do it. We're going to explore all the hidden depths of the anti-historium right now.
Okay, so this anti-historium, this negative space of history, is a pretty cool concept.
It really is. It makes you rethink those traditional historical narratives.
Yeah, it's like we've been so focused on the main story, the figure in the foreground.
That we've forgotten about the background, the context.
Exactly. So the anti-historium, it's all that stuff that's left out of the dominant story.
Intentionally or not.
Yeah, those voices that don't get heard, the perspectives that are ignored, the stories that never get told.
It's about acknowledging that the historical record, even though it might seem official, is never really complete.
There are always different sides to the story.
Exactly. History isn't just one big truth. It's more like a tapestry.
The tapestry.
Yeah, woven together from all these different threads, and a lot of those threads have been hidden or forgotten.
It's like that saying, history is written by the victors. Is that what the anti-historium is trying to challenge? Giving a voice to those who lost?
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that power has always played a role in shaping how history is told. The anti-historium, it invites us to dig a little deeper, question what we've been told, and look for those alternative perspectives that haven't been given the same attention.
Can you give me an example? Like, how would this play out in a specific historical event?
Let's take the exploration of the American West, for example. The traditional story, it usually focuses on the pioneers, the cowboys, the gold rush.
Yeah, that whole Wild West image we get from movies.
Right, a story of rugged individualism and manifest destiny, but what about the people who are already living there?
The Native Americans.
Exactly. Their stories, their cultures, how they saw those events, they're often pushed aside.
So, looking at the anti-historium here would mean bringing those Native American voices to the front, acknowledging their experiences.
Their displacement, their resilience, their connection to the land.
Their side of the story.
It's about recognizing that there's always more to the story than what we might initially learn, and that those missing pieces, they can change our whole understanding.
This is making me think about my own family's history, you know. I love hearing those old stories and looking at the photo albums.
Oh, me too.
But now I'm realizing that there are probably so many stories that I haven't heard, so many perspectives that have been lost over time.
That's a really common experience. We all inherit these narratives about our families, our communities.
Growing up trees.
Exactly. But by exploring this anti-historium, we can start to fill in those blanks, uncover those hidden truths that can help us understand who we are and where we came from.
It's like we become detectives of our own past.
That's a great way to put it. It shows that we're not just passively absorbing information, we can actively shape our understanding of history.
Wow, this whole deep dive has been mind-blowing. We've looked at history as this complex system with its own logic, its potential problems, and its hidden layers.
We've gone deep into these fascinating ideas: historiomes, historiopathies, habitants, and the anti-historiome.
It's been a wild ride. But the biggest takeaway for me, I think, is that history isn't just a bunch of facts and dates.
It's a living force that still affects us today.
Exactly. And we have the power to think about history in a more critical way, to question what we've been told, and to search for those untold stories that can make our understanding richer and even inspire us to create a better future.
It's been a great exploration, hasn't it? We've challenged those traditional narratives, embraced the complexity of the past, and hopefully opened our minds to new ways of seeing the world around us.
Absolutely. And for all of you listening, keep in mind that the past isn't really gone. It's still here with us, shaping who we are and where we're going. So keep questioning, keep searching, and keep diving deep into that incredible story we call history.